In this video, I'm going to go over the Generative Artificial Intelligence policy for ECH 3101. Now, generative artificial intelligence, or generative AI, is a type of artificial intelligence that could create content, such as text, images, video, or even software code. Now, such generative AI tools that the College of Engineering has licenses to allow you to use include Microsoft Copilot and also Gemini or Gemini Notebook, which we'll talk a little bit more in a bit. Now, in general, in this course, using generative AI to complete a homework problem is discouraged, but using it to clarify course content, such as your post-it notes, your handwritten notes, or even to generate practice problems, is acceptable. Now, if you are going to use generative AI in this course, it needs to be properly cited and disclosed. So, for instance, on your homework assignments, on the first page, we expect you to declare if you use generative AI, what generative AI tools you used, and how you used those generative AI tools. Failure to disclose the use of generative AI on an assignment is plagiarism, and plagiarism violates the honor code for both Florida A&M University and Florida State University. And so as a result, you will be penalized in your course grade, and potentially harsher penalties will be applied. Now, the other thing I also want to emphasize is that, you know, at this moment, generative AI is still very highly susceptible to inaccuracies and bias, right? It's reliant on some sort of training data. And for most of the tools, you have no idea what that training data is or where they come from, all right? And so if you do choose to use any sort of generative AI to help you complete assignments, you should assume that its output is incorrect and that anything it outputs, you need to actually verify using primary sources or any sort of reliable source, right? And so it's going to be your responsibility to evaluate both the accuracy and relevance of any generative AI produced content that you choose to use. Now, in terms of, what sort of assignments generative AI is allowed or not allowed to be used in this course, I've broken it down in this list here, which is in the syllabus. And so generative AI can be used to help you with your video lecture assessments or your homework. However, you cannot use generative AI to help you complete in-class quizzes, your in-class midterms, or your final exam, right? Each of these three types of assignments is going to be closed book, closed notes, closed computer, um, just in class. And so you can't use generative AI to help you complete those assignments. Okay? And so I mentioned that such generative AI tools that you could use include Microsoft Copilot or Gemini Notebook. Um, However, in this course, I actually took the time to even set up a Gemini notebooks for you. So there's one notebook for the course and another one for the textbook. And so in this video, I want to go over the Gemini notebook that we use for the course. And so if you click on this link, it will take you to the Gemini notebook for the ECH 3101 course. I want to emphasize that in order to use this notebook, you have to be logged in to Google using your FSU account. And so this applies to both FSU students and also FAMU students. And so in this ECH 3101 notebook, it works, there's three different panels that you could see here. And so the middle panel here, this is, your typical sort of chat input, like you see in other sort of AI agents. And so in this chat input, you could ask it any sort of question. So for instance, what is the first law of thermodynamics? Okay, so I'm going to input this prompt, all right? And while it's generating an answer, we'll take a look at the other panels. And so this panel on the left-hand side, this is the panel that specifies all of the data that is being used in this notebook. And so the data that's being used in this notebook is the content that's already being used in the course and that's available on Canvas. right? So here are all your video lectures. Here are your video lecture notes. Here are additional documents like steam tables or the homework problem rubric and glossary of thermodynamic terms, right? And so as we go through this course, I'll upload additional content into this notebook. It'll all be all the same content that you will be available on Canvas. So that includes the handwritten notes, homework solutions, everything. Okay? All right, so we see that in the middle in the chat bot, so I asked it, what is the first law of thermodynamics? And then it gave me some sort of answer here, right? Right, and so it goes into more depth about what is the first law of thermodynamics, how it differs for closed systems and open systems, and what are the components that make up that first law of thermodynamics, right? And so just like any sort of other, generative AI chatbot, you could use the ECH 3101 notebook the same way. The main difference is now this sort of AI is only going to rely on content from the course, right? So you know transparently where all these answers are coming from. It does not use any other sort of information. The other thing I want to point out is the panel on the right. And so in this panel on the right, I've generated additional documents to help you study for this course. And so that includes, summary notes. So this is just taking all the content from the video lectures and video lecture notes and just rewords it in a different way, reorganizes it in case you want to see it in a different way. There's a FAQ, frequently asked question document. And then, additionally, for those that are interested, I also produce audio podcasts and video podcasts that summarize the content as well.
Energy is the
So you could see here that based on the course notes, I had the Gemini notebook produce additional sort of videos and materials. And so if you're interested, you're also welcome to listen to these podcasts or watch these videos as another way to kind of study the concepts in this course. Okay. All right. And so that brings me to the end of this video.